We're back. Another edition of Colts Corner with myself. That would be Kevin Bowen and Eddie Garrison on the ones and twos. About to put a bow tie on the month of January. Senior Bowl week. Always an important week for the Colts. They have been, gosh, Eddie, what do you think? Probably 3 to 4 players every draft class come from the Senior Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Seems to be a number to peg. So important week for them down there. And then really, I don't expect anything too crazy into February. Certainly we're less than a month away from the Combine starting, so that'll be probably the next big item, and then you'll inevitably get some re-signs, and then the new league year will begin in mid-March, so we'll hit on a lot of different topics here upcoming. I thought on today's pod a couple things. First off, Jordan Reid, ESPN draft analyst, really enjoy his insight. They've given him kind of more and more of a prominent voice there. We'll throw that in there. We did that interview with him on our morning show a couple of weeks ago, or at this point maybe just about a week ago, but we'll put that here on the pod. And then I want to go over the rookie class. I thought it was kind of I don't know the best word to describe it, Eddie, but like it's kind of a weird year for the Colts rookies. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, and different. There's kind of a lot there that I think you could look at this rookie class and want to make sure we individually kind of go over that 2024 group. And then a couple of Anarumo thoughts here to open things up. Chiefs and Eagles, Eddie Garrison. 17 straight one-possession victories for the Chiefs.
It's unreal and uncanny.
Last quarterback to beat them in a one-possession game?
Was it Carl Wentz?
It was not, but there is a local tie.
Matt Ryan?
Aiden O'Connell.
Oh, that's right, Christmas.
I think he was like 9 of 20 for 60 yards in the game.
Yes.
Zamir White was outstanding, and they got after Mahomes. And, yeah, I mean, of all the stats, and like the Chiefs stats, in particular the Mahomes stats, Eddie, it's DiMaggio Ripken stuff. Like, we're not going to see anybody ever do this again, right? 7 straight AFC title and or Super Bowl appearances? Like, I just don't – I can't imagine we'll see it, but 17 straight wins in one-possession games. I mean, that just takes one fluky thing.
Yeah.
The blitz doesn't get home. You know, Samaje Perine drops the third and, whatever. Like, I mean, all it takes is to hit 17 times in one-possession games. It's absurd, and I think the Eagles certainly have a hell of a roster. I've always been more of a Nick Sirianni guy than most. I know a lot of people hated how he acted towards Colts fans a few years ago. I just frankly think that is his, in a odd way, that it's his passion. It's his energy. And honestly, I think the Colts could use some of that. At times it looks a bit psychotic, but he's been able to manage some egos there. And I'd take a 9-14, 11-14 win run or whatever he's done these last 4 years and a couple Super Bowl appearances. So cannot wait for a week from Sunday in New Orleans.
How about your Irish getting a win last night?
Irish basketball. Nice win over Georgia Tech. Marcus Burton outstanding late. Yeah, I was standing.
He looks healthy now.
I was up in front of the TV at 11:01 p.m. 3 inches from the TV. And I'm like, it was one of those moments where I'm like, damn, is this healthy? It's a Tuesday night.
How did Maddie Bowen feel about that?
She was up. She's like, I'm going upstairs. She knew I was locked in. She goes, I can't do it. I'm going upstairs and watching Severance. I was like, well,
is that the new show you two are watching?
Like, Severance. I'm boy, I mean, that's trying to dissect that show will make you get gray hair like none other. So that's where we're at. Should we get into a little Lou Anarumo?
We can. Is Severance the new show you're watching?
Yeah, but it's just so over my head at times, man. You got to be so freaking smart and locked in. I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to watch a little TGL golf on Monday and she's yelling at me, you got to pay attention. And she's right. You have to.
You're watching golf on Monday?
Well, it's great. Tiger and Rory indoors. I mean, it's a Monday. It's, 8:45. What else do you want me to do?
Spend time with your wife?
Yeah, well, yeah. I feel like I do enough of that. All right, before I get in trouble, Anarumo-wise, when we last did our pod, he was getting ready to meet the media, I think, the next day. I guess, Eddie, before I get to Anarumo, let's go back to 4th and 5 in the AFC title game. That, I think, is what you want from your defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. And you hear Chiefs players and you hear Bills players talk about that play afterwards. Chiefs players. We hadn't done that blitz all game. Bills players. Oftentimes they showed pressure at the line, but then they'd back out of it. So they're thinking coming to the line of scrimmage, hey, we're going to do that. And I don't know if you caught this, but like Romo, and you know what? For all of Romo's faults, Romo's very good at the pre-play predicting stuff. Mm-hmm. He thinks Allen's going to have time like none other. He keeps on saying that. He's like, Jim, they're going to have a ton of, Allen's going to have a ton of time here. Well, boom. Then that's what happens. So, again, in that moment, can you set something up for it, and can you deliver, and can you do something different, exotic? And I think that's exactly what it was, and I think Louis Anarumo strikes me as a guy that would do that. Again, it's going to be a little bit more man coverage, a little bit more, I think, coverages, plural, in general, and then, a little bit more from a blitz standpoint. Not overwhelming, but it will be a little bit more. So that stood out to me. I think, when he's saying last Thursday, identify what an offense does well, don't let them beat you right-handed, is a popular phrase. I could not agree more on that. So, and I would say the last thing that stood out to me, Eddie, was he doesn't feel like this is much of a rebuild. I think he felt like when he walked into Cincinnati, it was a pretty significant rebuild. Mm-hmm. Now, when he says that, it's a little bit scary to me of like, boy, I still think some personnel needs tweaking. And like, this might be a little thing, but like defensive line-wise, Eddie, like Cincinnati had a bunch of fat dudes. They have DJ Reader's a big dude. BJ Hill's a big dude. They had a bunch of guys north of 310 pounds. The Colts really haven't been that. Grover carries his weight so well that we probably don't think of him as that big. But like before adding Raekwon Davis, the Colts really weren't, 315.
Space eaters?
Yeah, 300, exactly. Space eaters, two gap eaters. And I feel like this could be a little bit more of that. So, again, personnel tweaks defensively. What do we see? But, the Kenny Moore, Mike Hilton comp just seems so obvious. And
BJ Hill is a free agent for what it's worth.
Yeah, and I assume that, you got Grover, right?
Right.
So, and obviously you have Buckner still. So, but yeah, those were the things that stood out to me. Anything Anarumo-wise before we get into the rookie recaps?
Not really. I just thought, his response to being asked about, the Colts defense dealing with some ego issues last year was a good one, too.
Yeah, he handled that well. I would also say what stood out to me is, when talking about free safety, because that position to me, Eddie, I'm still curious what it'll look like in 2025. He brought up Jesse Bates' name. And again, when they lost Jesse Bates, things, frankly, kind of went to hell. He called Jesse Bates a problem solver.
Yeah.
That's a nice compliment. It's an intellectual compliment. I would think Julian Blackmon, at times, the Colts have viewed him as a problem solver. Problem solver, to me, doesn't scream a rookie. And the Colts have really no other free safety option on this roster. So, again, how does that play out? With Blackmon's free agency, I would call it a pretty weak safety and even corner free agency class. Are you going to pay top dollar for Javon Holland, a Justin Simmons, somebody like that? Again, do you want to rely on a rookie? That's never really been Anarumo's MO. So that'll be one I will continue to watch here over the next month plus.
Anything else to add? Would you like to get into the rookie recaps?
Yeah, let's get into rookie recap.
All right, Kev, let's start with Leatu Latu.
I feel like you just summarize it of he hit the rookie wall. Just point blank period. You and I have discussed Jared Verse before. Honestly, Eddie, I don't know if people have looked at Dallas Turner's numbers, but they were extremely quiet this past season. So, that position is just not one that you see a ton of rookie production from. I remain high on Latu. I think if you look at his numbers and his snap counts, it really wasn't as bad as I think people are making it out to be. I really think the super quiet finish, and you're really talking, he stripped Goff in that Lions game, which I think could have been such a big play in that game. No one pounces on it. And ever since then, ever since that play, I can't tell you one play he made the final month plus of the season. So that is it. That's obviously something you've got to look at. But he really was having a pretty nice rookie campaign, I would say, up until that point. So I just think there's context. Too often we just throw in whatever bust or stud, et cetera, et cetera. But that's how I look at Latu's rookie year. 4
sacks, 12 quarterback hits, 23 pressures, 3 forced fumbles, 5 tackles for loss.
He actually led the team in pressures, which I don't know is a ringing endorsement on the rest of the group. Obviously, Buckner missing 5 games was a big issue. But, again, I remain high on him. The fact that I think Anarumo is very intrigued by him has to be open-minded. And, we'll see how DN plays out. Kwity Paye will be in a contract year next year. Samson Ebukam back from the Achilles. What does that look like? Dayo Dengbo's free agency, I think will be one that'll be debated a bit. So I'll be curious to see. And, do they do anything else? There's a couple of veteran DN names out there. Nothing earth-shattering, but there's a couple of them that I'll be curious to see. Again, this gets back into our Anarumo. I know it's not fat guys. It's more of, skinny guys off the edge. How do you view the defensive line group?
Now to the more polarizing rookie of the class, A.D. Mitchell.
Boy, that is so true. We had the Twitter question last week, Eddie, of okay, where does he get playing time? And, that's obviously a good problem to have, and, you don't feel like you have to force the playing time. The fact that you could make the argument he had one positive this season.
It was the game against Buffalo.
Well, I'm saying more of his, one positive game. I'm saying he had one positive element to his overall play over 17 games.
The ability to get open?
That's a pretty good positive.
Oh, right? Yeah.
It's a pretty important positive. I would argue Colts wide receivers in recent years have struggled to get open.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that, individually, you feel like he possesses that trait. And again, I would say listen to his peers talk about him, too. I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. and Reggie Wayne, I don't think are just handing that stuff out there just to hand it out.
No.
They know he has a special talent in that realm. Having said that, that's where the positives stop. Timing and finishing plays was a massive issue. It was an issue with Richardson, and it was an issue with Flacco. It was too many times he ran off the field and Reggie Wayne had to talk to him. Or Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson ran off the field and they wanted to talk to Reggie Wayne. That, that is a issue. If you look at it, Eddie, 23 catches and I think it was 55 targets.
Yes.
So 28 incompletions, 4 drops. So it's not
32?
Is my math?
Yeah, 52 minus 23 is 32.
Thank you. Gosh, boy, math on this podcast. We've had so many issues over the years. I think I've had so many issues over the year. So that's 4 drops and 32 incompletions?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not horrific. Obviously, you want that to be better. But again, it's not a massive, massive thing. So, obviously finishing plays is going to be a huge area of growth. And what is that role in year 2? Inevitably injuries are probably going to happen, but the fact that his one positive was that, I think leaves me of I'm not slamming the door shut on a bust here. I'd rather have that be if you're to say, well, he's really sure-handed, but he never could get open. I don't know if I'd be that optimistic about it. And boy, what a big year 2 for him. Because when you think about it, I mean, Pittman is one more year closer to the end of that year. Pittman will be contract year after next year? It was just a 3-year extension.
Yeah.
Weirdly, to think about it like that. And he'll be nearing 30. And then Pierce is in a contract year next year. So, you're just, if all of a sudden Mitchell has a huge ascent in year 2, that could really impact your future at that spot.
So just to compare him to other rookie wideouts that were selected in, the second and third round, starting with Keon Coleman, for example. He played 13 games, 29 catches, 57 targets, 556 yards. So almost the same in terms of catches and targets, but the yards per catch was significantly higher for Keon Coleman. And then, of course, you had Ladd McConkey, who turned out to be the number 1 in L.A. with the Chargers. 82 on 112 targets, 1,149 receiving yards.
He was great late in the year, too.
Oh, yeah. Jalen Polk, 12 catches on 33 targets for 87 yards. Of course, we already highlighted AD. And then Malachi Corley was in the third round for the Jets. He only had 3 catches on 6 targets for 16 yards.
Boy, I liked him coming out.
The question I have for you is the number or were the expectations set too high for A.D. Mitchell going into the season because everyone felt like he was a first-round pick and the Colts needed more?
Yeah, I think the public comments probably didn't help. There was a lot of praise from internal people early on. You don't often see that with rookies. You obviously looked at Mitchell in the big games in college. that stood out. He was what, the 10th wideout taken? That's why he wears number 10, is that right? Something like that?
Sure.
And he was like the first or second best wideout this year, based off production purely. So, that doesn't match up. And again, I think people wanted to be done with Pierce. People wanted something different than Pierce. And I think that's what intrigued a lot of people. And we hadn't seen, outside of Pittman and I guess a little bit of Pierce, you're just kind of waiting for a new wide receiver.
10 receivers selected before him.
He
was the 11th.
That's why it was. Again, maybe a little bit on that end, but I think this is one that, I have a general idea of what Latu's role will be in year 2. Mitchell, it's a little bit more of an unknown. I think that's where some of the intrigue is. But again, he got open at a really, really high level.
Matt Gonzalez got some time during the season just because of Braden Smith injury and Bernard Ryman missing a game because of a concussion. So how did you grade his season?
Yeah, I thought on the right side it was, serviceable for a rookie year. I didn't think it was as alarming as Freeland's rookie year. If you can kind of compare them both from back-to-back years. Freeland a 4th rounder, Gonzalez a 3rd rounder. And remember, Eddie, when they drafted him, there was a bit of an unknown of where would he be at the NFL level positionally. He was asked to play over on the left side a couple of times when Bernard Ryman was out. So this one to me is, the whole Braden Smith situation is so awkward.
I was about to say, do we know anything more on that?
Right. No, we don't. I think you have 2 Braden Smith questions. 1, does he want to continue to play football? That's obviously a big question. And then 2 is, do the Colts want him to continue to play football at the financial price tag they're paying him?
$19 million, right?
You can open up a lot by moving on from him.
What you can open up is $17 million?
Right. And again, O-line in general, we'll get more into this with Bordellini and even Dalton Tucker at the end, and Will Fries being a free agent. I mean, Eddie, you could have 2 to 3 new starters. Some would say it's time to do that. Others would say, do you want that for Anthony Richardson in year 3? It's a very, very interesting time for the Colts offensive line group. But I thought Gonzalez, I was a little bit more hesitant on him, and I thought he came in, and again, serviceable. And I'll be interested to see how it plays out here, if it's going to be a full-time gig as early as 2025.
How about Tanner Bordellini?
Yeah, handful starts. The only thing I thought that was awkward with Bordellini was, remember late in the year when they did Penter for another game?
Yeah.
When Bordellini was healthy? That was a little bit of oh boy, that's quite the nod to Penter there. And I don't know. I mean, in the coaches' minds, they obviously thought Penter had earned that. I guess I'm a little curious of did they think Bordellini's level of play maybe wasn't at what I thought it was? Remember when he was drafted, he was Jason Kelsey-like in the combine, agility drills and all of that. It was a little bit more of a strength standpoint, but I'm just under the assumption, and this is me just saying it, that this is a passing of the torch, and it's going to happen. It doesn't make sense to do franchise tag with Ryan Kelly, does it?
No. So
then what? I just think it's Bordellini time. And me and interior offensive line positions, I think there's an element of, if you can get day 3 picks in those spots and you can hit on them, that is huge financially. Huge.
Yeah.
And look at it. Will Fries at right guard and Tanner Bordellini at center. And that would be really nice. And obviously Fries, could be going into his second contract. So that'll be a little different. So all in all, the Bordellini injury was unfortunate because he could have got even more action, but I would be content with them passing the torch.
Of course, there's state of the obvious, too. If you hit on these guys and they're playing on the rookie deal, it allows you to spend money elsewhere.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, of these day 3 picks that, especially in the interior offensive line, I think it's important to try and explore that route.
All right, Kev, you hyped this guy up in training camp. You're like, there's going to be one game where it's going to be the Anthony Gould game.
I was dead wrong.
Yeah.
How many snaps did he even get on offense?
That's a good question. 15.
Incredible.
72 on special teams.
He got benched for 2 months? That probably didn't help the cause. I still thought late in the year, I'm like, Steichen, you got to throw him one deep ball, right? I'm like, I just thought at some point they would turn to him. And I mean, hell, for those of you that were out at Grand Park, I mean, you were out there, Eddie. Like, he made a couple plays there with Flacco. He probably made more of the plays in the spring. I will give Gould credit. I think, when you get benched like that so abruptly.
He had a big touchdown against Arizona in the joint practices with Anthony in a live-on-live session.
Yeah, that's a great memory by you on that. Yeah. Gosh, that seems like 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
I thought Gould did a nice job as a returner once he got back. So, I think that's a credit to him. Again, I thought it was kind of an abrupt benching. I don't know if I totally agreed with it, but I thought he did a nice job when he got that second chance. And then when you look at the rest of the day 3 picks, Eddie, it's really just Carlisle's. Because they cut Jalen Simpson, they cut Micah Abraham, they cut Jonah La'alu. Now they wanted to bring him back. Raiders, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
I think is where he ended up. So, Carlisle will be the other one. Is he your third linebacker? If I said to you right now, Eddie, Braden Smith or Matt Gonzalez, EJ Speed or Jalen Carlisle, Ryan Kelly or Tanner Bortolini. Like, these are the discussions they have to have. And again, all 3 of them, they are different. Obviously, in Speed and Kelly's case, they're free agents, purely. I think Carlisle's, I don't know. Did Carlisle show you the most out of the 3? Maybe. Those flashes to me seemed a little bit more early season. When he returned from the injury, I don't know if we saw as much flash. I mean, we really saw it in that Dolphins game before he got hurt. I don't know if we saw as much late in the year. And then I think from an Anarumo standpoint, the question is this the route you continue to want with linebackers? Do you want the safeties, more or less? Darius Leonard soaking wet is what, 215?
Oh, yeah.
Speed's kind of the Speed certainly is that. Franklin is a 7th round pick, so at that point, kind of measurables are out the window a little bit. So, Carlisle's, is this the path you want to go? And is linebacker a need? Free agent need? I've always just viewed it as a draft need because they've been so good at it. Why not just spend a draft pick and you're going to hit? But like we were on our morning show today, we were looking through a little bit of that free agency list, and there's a name that I feel like I watch the Chiefs defense. When I watch him, Nick Bolton just jumps off the screen.
He does.
I mean, every time. I feel like he's everywhere, and he's a free agent. Like, is that something you want to explore? They did play. Cincinnati played a good amount of nickel and even some dime. So I don't think necessarily you need the abundance of linebackers, but again, the Carlisle Speed thing will be one to watch.
I'm trying to look at least this past year with Cincinnati. So Akeem Davis-Gaither was 6'2", 228.
And he's a free agent, right?
I think so. I'm not 100. I don't know. He's not. I don't think he is.
I feel like one of them is Pratt or I think it's Wilson.
It's Joseph Osai.
Oh, yeah, and he's more of an edge, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Jermaine Pratt is 6'3", 250. So if you just compare the builds, Pratt is like Zaire, and then Carlisle's would fit.
And frankly, Eddie, I mean, they haven't had that type of. I mean, that size and weight for Pratt. I mean, that's a throwback size and weight.
Yeah.
For a linebacker. I mean, the Colts haven't had that in. I mean, Franklin's what do they list Franklin at? 6'1", 240. Did they list him at that? I have no idea what Zaire Franklin's size and weight listed is, but it certainly can't be
6 foot 235.
Yeah, and that sounded good. Bless you to Matty Bowen in studio. Matty Bowen in studio. Should we get Matty on the mic? Matt's thoughts on the Super Bowl. Grab that mic over there.
Hey, is this thing on?
It's on. What do you got? Chiefs, Eagles. Give us 30-second breakdown on it.
I am bored by the options, and
are you jealous of the Chiefs?
I don't think that I would necessarily be in a position to be jealous, just because I'm like I don't know. I just like don't care as much, but I just am bored. Like I just want something new. But that said, I obviously want the Eagles to win, just because the Chiefs have won too much. So this is like the least hot take ever. But that's my take.
Fly, Eagles, fly is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
And you are a bigger fan of Josh Allen's significant other or Travis Kelce's significant other?
Definitely Travis Kelce's significant other. I don't know that much about Haley Steinfeld. I don't know enough that I don't even know her last name. So, but no one compares to Tay.
Will Caitlin Clark be in the suite of the Super Bowl?
Gosh, that would be so cool. I don't think so.
And
No.
last one, odds of a proposal from Kelsey on the field.
No way. That would just prove everything that we don't like about celebrities. Keep it private. You've given us enough in the public eye.
It goes against everything that they've done so far, too.
Yeah, take your proposal to some private
Look at
beach
that.
in Mykonos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eddie Garrison calling into E! Network here with that take. Okay, all right. Well, thank you for chiming in.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry, I sneezed and I got the invite. I guess.
No, all good. We always enjoy your insight. Maddie Bowen here in studio with us. The last one, Eddie, I was going to name just rookie wise is Dalton Tucker. Very commendable. To be an undrafted guy and give that sort of effort. I don't want to act like again you're handing the Will Fries keys to him, but nice find certainly as an undrafted free agent and obviously add some good depth there. And we'll see how really your free agents. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's just Ryan Kelly and Danny Pinter, I think, up front. So you should have a lot of retention from that offensive line group here coming up this offseason.
I'll put the link in the description for that at 1075thefan.com. Kevin, are you ready for some Twitter questions?
Well, should we get to Jordan Reid?
Oh, good call.
Let's get to Jordan Reid, ESPN draft analyst. We did this again probably about a week or so ago, a little bit earlier in the month of January is probably the best way to put it. Jordan Reid from ESPN. Let's go back to Monday night. Either side, probably a little bit more on the winning side. Who and what stood out to you from a draft standpoint of what you watched in the national title game?
Oh, man, I was like a kid in a candy store watching that game. There was just so many prospects running around the field, some that are eligible this year and some that aren't even eligible this year. But, Ohio State was just too talented for Notre Dame, and we saw the talent discrepancy throughout that game. And Notre Dame came out, and they had that impressive 18-play drive to start the game. But it just felt like they were throwing their haymakers a little too early, and they really expended them all on that first drive, and they mounted a comeback. So kudos to them. But you just saw the talent all over the field for Ohio State. And Will Howard is somebody that's really helped his draft stock in the college football playoff. He's arguably been the best quarterback that played in the college football playoff. And, they're loaded at every other position, too. They're running back tandem of Quinshon Judkins, who had a terrific game with 3 touchdowns, and Travion Henderson, who really shined in some spots, too. So Ohio State's talent just really shined. And Notre Dame had some other players that played really well, like Xavier Watts, the safety of Notre Dame. He had a really good game, and there were some others as well.
I imagine you're as high as you can possibly be on Jeremiah Smith, and if he was in this draft, he'd be squarely right at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he reminds me so much of Julio Jones when he was at Alabama, and the size is eerily similar. The catch radius is phenomenal, and then just how strong he plays. He's just so mature for a now 19-year-old true freshman. It's just really remarkable.
What did you think, Jordan, when they didn't give safety help to Gray on the end of the game there? By the way, Kevin Bowen next to me, he's a big Notre Dame fan. He was in the building, Jordan, so he was very sad there was no safety help there late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I was shocked, but I mean, I thought they should have took the approach that that Texas did when they played Notre Dame, and that you try to take Jeremiah Smith out of the game, which is what they did, and you really live with Cardinal Tate and Emeka Buka really taking over the game. So I was surprised to see that they did leave him in single coverage, just because one-on-one coverage is pretty much automatic for him to catch the ball. But hindsight's always 20/20. But if Al Golden could go back, I definitely believe he would have double covered Jeremiah Smith there.
Yeah, I think I'll get over 3rd and 11 the next time Notre Dame plays in the national title, and Lord knows when that'll be. Jordan Reid, ESPN draft analyst, with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Your colleague Mel Kiper Jr., he just mocked Tyler Warren to the Colts at 14. It's probably a little bit of Big Ten country, and obviously Warren is a hell of a player, but certainly a lot of Colts fans want that given the needs at tight end. My question would be this: do you see Warren getting to 14 in a draft class that by all accounts lacks the offensive firepower that we saw this time last year?
I would not be surprised if he does not get to 14, honestly, just because he's actually the number 8 overall player on my big board right now. So that just goes to show you how special of a player that he is. And I mean, there wasn't a record that he didn't set at Penn State last year. He reminds me a lot of TJ Hawkinson when he was coming out of Iowa, and we've seen the career that he's gone on to have as a former first-round pick. I believe he went at number 8 overall, but when he was coming out too. So Tyler Warren is a very similar type of talent. I even think he's a better receiver than what Hawkinson was coming out. So I think he would be a huge help, especially to Anthony Richardson, who's somebody that needs to have a big year next year, especially considering what happened this past season. So just surround him with as many weapons as possible, and Warren definitely would help in that area.
ESPN draft analyst Jordan Reid joining us here on this Wednesday on the Fan. He joins us on the Payless Liquors hotline. If Warren doesn't get there to 14, and listen, I'm in total agreement that I don't think he will get to 14. Look at Brock Bowers last year. He didn't get down to Indianapolis. I think the same thing could happen this year. I mean, obviously, a lot of holes, defense as well, safety, corner. Where do you think the Colts would go if Warren is not there?
Well, safety, I think, is one area where they could look to address. I think they need to find somebody opposite of Nick Cross. That's a huge need for them. Julian Blackmon, just his development hasn't taken off like they thought it would. So someone like Malachi Starks of Georgia, I think that would be another name that you see commonly mocked to the Colts. I think he would be a terrific fit just because he's a player that is so interchangeable. He can play free safety. He can play strong safety. He has terrific ball skills. He does need to clean up his tackling a little bit, I thought. He was a little bit worse in that area this year. But as far as the ball skills and just the interchangeability with him, I think he would be a terrific fit.
You got any thoughts on the South Carolina safety? I hope I'm pronouncing the last name right. Nick Amanawari, a big dude, 6'3", 225. Yeah. That is someone that I also kind of saw in that mid-ish first-round range.
Yeah, so I've had an opportunity to see him about 3 or 4 times up close this year. And, I mean, he's every bit of 6'3", 225 pounds, one of the bigger safeties in this draft class. And I just can't wait for everybody to see him test. I think he's probably going to run in the 4.4s. He's probably going to jump 40-plus in the vertical and probably over 11 in the broad jump. So I think his stock is definitely going to take off. And it would surprise me if he ends up being a top 20 or top 25 pick before it's all said and done. He kind of has Jeremy Chin kind of skill set. I think he's a little bit more flexible than what Chin was coming out, a little bit more interchangeability as well. But just trying to give you a mindset or paint a picture of what his skill set is like. But the Colts need somebody like that on the back end. So Nick Amanawari is somebody I think is definitely going to rise as we get closer to April.
Again, Jordan Reid, ESPN draft analyst. You can find that Jordan_Reid on Twitter from ESPN. He's with us here on the Payless Liquors hotline. Jordan, the deepest position in the draft, the weakest position in the draft?
Deepest is, I would say, 2. It would be defensive line and running back. I think those are your 2 positions that are clearly the deepest in this year's class. And I mean, this year's defensive line class is absolutely loaded. We could see as many as 5 or 6 interior defensive linemen go within the first 2 or so rounds. And then defensive end is also loaded as well. So you're going to see a lot of those names fly off of the board. And then running back, this is a really deep group as well. You have to be living under a rock if you haven't heard of Ashton Genty and what he did this year. Just a phenomenal season from him. But, I mean, we saw 2 of them on display in the national title game in Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, and there's plenty of other names. Amarian Hampton from North Carolina, Caleb Johnson of Iowa, are 2 others that you'll hear quite frequently in those early rounds. So it is a very, very deep running back class as well. As far as the weakest, I would probably say linebacker right now. It's just not an overly great linebacker class. And, you know, I'm still struggling to see who would be the first one off of the board. Right now, there's been so many guys I've been going back and forth with. Jahai Campbell of Alabama is going to be one you hear quite frequently, who's my favorite of the bunch right now. But one name that's really rising is Carson Swessinger of UCLA, who will be at the Senior Bowl. And I definitely think he's going to be a name that becomes very popular.
Jordan Reid, ESPN, with us here on this Wednesday. Who's the third quarterback taken? And then are we really going to only have 2 quarterbacks in the first round? Jordan, you know how these NFL teams get as we get closer to draft time. Come on.
Oh, man, you guys put me on the spot. Right now, I would say the third quarterback off of the board is Jalen Milroe of Alabama. And he's going to have an opportunity at the Senior Bowl to really improve his stock. Just being able to get some more eyes on him. Looking forward to seeing him throw in person. But another name to keep in mind, I think, could rise up boards here over the next few months or so is Jackson Dart of Ole Miss. He's another name that's going to be down at the Senior Bowl. And the big question about him is, how does he look outside of Lane Kiffin's offense, to where a lot of targets are really schemed open for him and he's not doing a ton of progressions? So at the Senior Bowl, he's going to get an opportunity to show that he can operate an NFL style of offense. So he's going to have an opportunity to raise up the board. So I would say it's between Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart right now.
Again, that was Jordan Reid. Eddie, you and I were talking prior to the podcast. I think I'd like to do a Bernard Pollard maybe next week.
Okay.
Our local fans will probably recall that name. Former Purdue DB. He, a hard hitter. Gosh, boy, that man laid some freaking wood.
Like Cam Chancellor?
Yeah, I mean, that dude was, boy, if you saw him in West Lafayette, you'd want to run the other way. But he had some Lou Anarumo thoughts when we joined us. Again, Anarumo came a little bit after. He didn't recruit him to Purdue, but basically he was talking with us about how his old position coach was like, cussed him out every minute, every practice. His first position coach, and said Anarumo came in and was more of like, dude, no. You're too important. We need you to be a communicator. Like, we need you to be, like, I need to build you up. Like, I want you to be, that quarterback of the secondary, if you will, which is funny because you watch him play and you think just, he just hit 24/7. He'd be flagged every other game in today's NFL. So we'll throw that on next week's pod. One item draft-wise before we get into Twitter questions. Did you see Daniel Jeremiah's mock earlier this week?
I haven't seen DJ's yet.
He had Abdul Carter going 1.
Not surprised.
He had Travis Hunter going 2. He had Tyler Warren going 7.
Interesting.
7 to the Jets for Tyler Warren. And then he had the Colts taking, I think it was Jahdae Barron, the Texas corner, who's a little on the shorter side. And again, new defensive coordinator. What personnel tweaks will there be? Eddie, if you look at the Cincinnati corners, they were also very measurably like the Colts corners. So I think we could be a little bit like-minded in that transition there. But Tyler Warren at 7 certainly stood out to me. And
he has a number 5 overall on his big board.
Daniel Jeremiah has always been kind of he's not a very throw the quarterbacks all up at the top. I mean, clearly, Abdul Carter going 1 and, Hunter going 2. So I thought that was a mock that really stood out to me. I've been writing a few articles up on our website here this offseason. I've gone back and rewatched the Chris Ballard press conference from a few weeks back. Boy, when you listen to his tight end answer, or I should probably say the answer of like the middle of the field needs to get better. Gosh, it just screams Warren.
Mm-hmm.
Just screams him. One thing to note, Senior Bowl happening right now, Eddie. Chris Watt, Colts assistant O-line coach, he is coaching the tight ends down there. And one of the tight ends is Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green.
Bowling Green, yeah.
Whew. I don't know if you came across Bowling Green football at all this year, but I watched a good amount of that Penn State game.
He was Bowling Green.
I mean, he was Bowling Green. His numbers, and again, he's more of a hybrid. Think of him more of as a Granson, just from a body type standpoint. Eddie, his collegiate stats this year: 117 catches. This is a tight end for 1,555 yards.
Weren't the 117 a tight end record in college football?
Oh, that's a great stat. It's got to be. Is that true?
I think so.
That's got to be. And it's not like he did this against, Colleen Bowen's Ball State of the world. Nothing against Ball State. Chirp,
or
chirp.
Colleen Bowen.
Or my mother. Chirp, chirp. 11 for 137 against Penn State and a touchdown. 8 for 145 against A&M. And then how about the bowl game? This is one game, Eddie. 17 for 213.
Oh, yeah.
Absurd. So, again, it sounds like there is some tight end depth to this draft class. If Tyler Warren's going 7, don't we need to start shifting the thinking here?
Fanning could be a second-round pick, right?
Right. So, I mean, are you starting, what about, what's his name? Loveland.
I love Colston Loveland.
I know there's some people that are high on him. So, and we've had this debate before about tight end. There are great tight ends out of round 2 and round 3, and hell, I mean, Kittle was round 5, so.
Yep. FBS single season record for receiving yards by a tight end, receiving yards per catch by a tight end. Receiving yards per game by a tight end, and receptions.
Unless you got anything else to add, let's get to Twitter questions.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun earlier on it.
No, all good.
Starting with Jamie. Will Fries do a contract this year? Bernard Ryman extension done this year? Quentin Nelson is up in 2026. Will probably be re-signed. If Chris Ballard is to spend money in free agency, have to move on from Ryan Kelly and Braden Smith, right? Can't have tons of money tied up in offensive line again.
Yeah, I think it's a good point Jamie brings up. Again, could you be looking at multiple starters that are different? The passing of the torch, it's a phrase I've used quite a lot. It's got to happen at some places. Now, again, O-line, it's a huge Ballard emphasis. Richardson's year 3, et cetera, et cetera. It is now the time to start to do that. But I think how Jamie's mapped it out, I think that's important. They got $28 million in cap space. They could obviously open up more. You mentioned the Braden Smith thing earlier. I mean, if you go out and make a significant quarterback move, $28 million can dry up in a hurry.
Yep.
So that is something. But I think right now, how I'd probably approach O-line this offseason, again, Braden Smith's the unknown. But I think a Bordolini, Gonzalez, re-sign of Fries, I do think you would need a couple of notable depth signings. Hey, does Fries not come back from the broken leg like you think? Mm-hmm. Does Gonzalez, if he is the right tackle, does he hit a bit of a wall? Just those kind of insurance projects are important there. I think that is probably the route that I would go.
Policies, not projects there, Kev.
Policies, thank you. Yes, to continue the insurance theme there. Very good.
Matt says, yo, Kevin, do you think Gus Bradley's defense might have been detrimental to the development of Anthony Richardson and the rest of the offense? I ask this while considering all the times we've seen rookie quarterbacks and third stringers look like Hall of Famers against the Colts defense. Given the ease in which opposing offenses have been able to march down the field against the Colts and complete a very high percentage of their passes, etc., is it too much of a stretch to think that this could have happened at times in practice? Could Steichen and or AR have overestimated the abilities of our offense based on the soft defensive scheme they often faced in practice? From another perspective, I think it could be very beneficial for Anthony Richardson to see more varied looks and maybe face a defense in practice that could perhaps replicate what he might actually see from opposing teams come game day. What are your thoughts? All the best. Love the pod. Thanks for all you guys do.
Matt, thank you for that. That was, boy, Eddie, that's a little outside of the box. And I think he's onto something. First off, I've always had issues with, the Bradley defense and just I think you put your offense at a disadvantage in game from a field position standpoint when you're not being as urgent to force 3-and-outs, et cetera, et cetera. But, let's go back to training camp last year and, kind of go down Matt's more of his path. Richardson was 68% in training camp last year?
Yes.
He had a 10% improvement from training camp year 1 to training camp year 2. Well, how did that translate to games?
It didn't.
Narrator's voice, it did not. So, yeah, I think this is a good point. And, Louis Anarumo comes from hey, I'm trying to beat Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in practice here. So, I think it's a good point. So, facing that, being exposed to it, I think is all important steps in the progress. The issue is when Matt brings this up, I think it's a great idea. I also think it's the 8th most important thing Anthony Richardson needs to do this offseason. That's the issue of again, the list is long and the list has some really hard questions to answer. And one of those questions still remains, can you stay healthy? That's Chris Ballard's biggest question, is availability. So it's just difficult.
Now, you're at practices more than I and certainly our listeners. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but the number one offense does not face the number one defense in practice, right?
During camp, yes. During camp.
During the season.
During the offseason. But during the season, you're scout teaming it. You might have a good-on-good period. Some teams do that. Not very often. But they do that occasionally. But during training camp, it is always, seemingly always, ones versus ones. So once you get in the season, you obviously dial that back a little bit. So, but, training, again, he's missed some precious time, more so, spring related than anything. But, he missed a little bit of time even in camp. So I do think Anarumo will be welcomed in that area.
2 questions left. Alex states, just watching the playoffs and looking at the upcoming Super Bowl, how damning is it that it's a big dose of reality that the Colts are nowhere near close to competing? Seriously, what has Chris Ballard been doing these 8 years, and why it took the debacle of last year for him to hopefully understand this? Sorry for the long question, but I look at other GMs like Roseman from Philadelphia, and it just frustrates me overall, man. 8 years of nothing from Ballard, and Irsay continues to allow it. At this point, we need new ownership.
Well, Alex, the last part is part of professional sports. Don't think you can change that. Obviously a lot of venting and certainly a lot of validity in what Alex is saying. Howie Roseman is certainly one that has been an excellent GM. It's stinging in a way. You would have said last year, Eddie, even with the Eagles, who'd the Eagles lose to? Round 1 of the playoffs? Bucks?
Yes.
You would have still said you thought the Eagles had a top 5 roster, probably. Top 7 roster. Like, I think people have kind of viewed the Eagles of like, they've got a good roster. And they just fell short last season. They just, for whatever reason, they couldn't get over that.
It was the dynamic between Sirianni and Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, that was all awkward. But like, you would have said they have a pretty talented offensive and defensive roster. And yet, what do? They go out, they get arguably the MVP in the NFL.
Yep.
How about Zach Bond at linebacker?
Off the practice squad from the Saints.
I mean, he's a first-team All-Pro.
He's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, too. Finalist.
And then look at your Defensive Rookie of the Year race.
Quinyon Mitchell?
You put Cooper DeJean maybe even on that list. Like, they took a very talented roster and added 4 significant pieces in 4 very different ways. Saquon was the flash. I mean, first-round pick, second-round pick. DeJean obviously had some of the medical stuff. And then, Bond was certainly just an unbelievable find. It's just, so, yeah, good luck with the new ownership. I think the thing that's just so frustrating from an Irsay point of view is it's just like, to accept it is just kind of hard to hear. A couple of years ago, it's all chips in. And
Period.
And now it's an acceptance of difference. One thing I did want to touch on, and I wrote this on 107bythefan.com, is like, we're starting to get into the period, Eddie, of the offseason of Chris Ballard's words are now being met with action.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the defensive coordinator hire. And I feel like if I had to evaluate Ballard's words from 2.5 weeks ago to the hiring of Anarumo, I think it largely matched. I walked out of that presser thinking, okay, I think they're going to make some defensive changes, but I didn't get the vibe a ton. I think that's kind of the Anarumo hire.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to do things differently. They will be a little bit more aggressive, but it's not Wink Martindale.
No.
It's not like the nth degree of it. So now we move on to kind of the next item in the offseason, that's free agency. The free agency words, they were different. Very different. Now, again, I know some people are like Alex, and some people are like, it's 8 years. I don't care what his words are. But, like, those words were different. He said, we're not close. Shane Steichen didn't say that. Jim Irsay didn't say that. Ballard said it. He was adamant that we need more tough guys. I've never heard him say that before. I'm used to you don't pay B players A money, and it sends the wrong message to the locker room. And instead, we heard 2.5 weeks ago, hey, we got to identify free agents better, and I got to be better at closing the deal on those guys. So they are words. They are mid-January. But so far, defense free agency draft, I thought free agency had the most different words. I thought defense had a little bit. I thought the draft probably had the quietest amount. So now, how much change will we get?
Final questions from Tyler. I don't think Ballard is ever changing his ways, and given he's going into a hot seat this season, how worried should we be that he vastly overpays Alec Pierce, Bernard Ryman, and Nick Cross on extensions? I don't think he's earned the right to extend any more players, given that 2025 has deadman walking vibes on every side of the ball.
Yes, another angle. Tyler, thank you for the question. It's another angle that I don't think I've thought a whole lot on, so I was glad Tyler brought it up because it kind of got me thinking. Eddie, I don't think Pierce and Cross deserve extensions. For 1 year? Like, when I look at the extensions he's given, unless you can pick out somebody that wasn't a 1-year guy, weren't all of them multi-year?
Correct.
So I just don't. I'd like to still keep Pierce and Cross on the edge of their seats. Ryman is probably one I could talk myself into a little bit more. It's a premium position. I just love how Ryman's wired, frankly, from a work ethic standpoint. So that would be one, but I don't. Would you give Pierce and Cross extensions?
No. I would need to see it again from both of them.
Right. And look, I guess I should preface by they both had really nice seasons, and commend both of them for that, for the situations they were in. But I guess Tyler's kind of getting at it. Should Irsay mandate no extensions? That's kind of an interesting thought. I don't know if I'm there, but that is an interesting thought. I don't know how much we may spend on this last week, but it is, one final thought kind of on the final 4 teams. Washington, you could look at Philly and, Matty Bones' eloquent words earlier of, it's the Chiefs and Eagles. It's just she says snooze fest. It's boring. So, like, if you would have said at the start of the year, hey, Chiefs and Eagles are going to be in the final game, you wouldn't have been stunned by that. Obviously, the Bills were right there. You wouldn't have been stunned by that. Washington's the outlier. And, Eddie, if you look at what they did, to me, when you hear Ballard say, we need more competition, I didn't do enough there. Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell had a great battle, and look how that played out for Pierce. Well, look at Washington. They added a bunch of these, like, older veterans.
Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz.
Austin Eckler.
Yeah.
Dante Fowler Jr.'s played in a Super Bowl. Marshawn Lattimore's been on good teams.
Yeah.
Again, not all of them have been on great teams.
Jeremy Chin.
Yeah. What's his name? The kid from the region who plays for the Chiefs. Allegretti, or however you say that.
Allegretti.
Yeah. Allegretti at guard. That's a lot of different types of players. But again, a lot of new faces. And I think that general offseason is like, if Ballard's words are going to lead to action, that's kind of what I'm envisioning. I don't know if Washington broke the bank necessarily.
Right.
Many, if any of those guys. But again, it's a rookie contract quarterback. How can you invest? Let's be honest. Washington is a losing culture.
Oh, yeah.
A laughing stock. So how do you change that? How do you infuse that? Obviously, literally a new owner. I guess to go back to Alex's point, he could wish for that. But a new head coach and a new GM and all that helps. But again, I think the locker room also helped.
He's Kevin Bowen at Kate Bowen 1070. I'm Eddie Garrison at Eddie Garrison _ on Twitter /XKev. What do you got coming out on the website?
Your favorite Pro Bowl skills competition. That's what we got tomorrow night. Give it to me.
Well, what do you got coming out on the website first while I think about
Tug
that?
of war, relay race, dodgeball. You got to love dodgeball.
Sure.
America's pastime.
Yeah, sure.
What I got on the website, I've started to do the evaluations. Steichen.
Red, yellow, green. We got that coming out soon?
Ballard. Red, yellow, green early next week. Green, yellow, red. It's the lightest shade of green I've done.
Really?
For someone that has no artistic background whatsoever, that probably isn't a great point. But for those that are totally not following along here, we get in free agency. We do green, yellow, red. Green, you should bring back. Yellow, you're on the fence. Red, you don't bring back. Do you stand on the table for any of these guys?
No.
No. So light green, light. I'm talking like lime color green, is what I'm going with. Your favorite Pro Bowl skill competition?
I told you dodgeball. I agreed with you.
I'm looking forward to the relay race. 4 dudes, baton, 40-yard dash each. I feel like you go in an NFL locker room.
Is Jonathan Taylor going to be in that?
Yeah, I would think Taylor would be, right? You go in an NFL locker room, the only thing I hear people chirping about more than who can play in the NBA is who's fastest.
Yeah.
Well, let's settle it. So, yeah, we'll get that coming up. Pro Bowl Thursday night skills competition.
I'll be fascinated to see if the guys actually go out for it because, what was it, a couple years ago where Micah Parsons beat, or was it Myles Garrett? One of them beat Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek was like barely running.
Yeah, I know. You get the quarterbacks throwing to targets and the punters punting in buckets and all of that. So, Pro Bowl week and then Super Bowl coming up.
Tic-tac-toe.
Next week. Tic-tac-toe. I actually enjoyed that. He's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Colts Corner signing off. We'll talk to you next week.